We should never allow the government to decide what is acceptable speech and what is unacceptable speech. We should penalize behaviors, not opinions, and not speech. If you start trying to regulate speech, you start trying to regulate thoughts, you start trying to regulate beliefs rather than behaviors, there's no way that you're not going to abridge the constitutional rights of millions of Americans.
Because of YouTube restrictions, we are only allowed to show images from the movie and not actual visuals. Just another way the socialists are controlling our freedoms of speech and expression. Thanks Obama for another global government trick of the trade. Another reason would be that women themselves do not want the male to be shown wearing something that they identify as their own permissive style of clothing. Go figure why that is.
Colobium pictures originated during the 1950s when men began to study their place in history as the dominant gender in the world. From as far back as the Roman Empire, men were distinctive and unique in a culture that began some 3,000 years ago where the man was the head of the household. He was happy to be the head of the house and proudly showed he was the stronger of the two sexes. Over the centuries though, women have begun a campaign to devalue and degrade the man himself as a gender. During the 1940s, history would showcase the man as the most important figure in history, yet women began their plans to destroy the historical account of man's influence on clothing, politics, inventiveness, and slowly she began controlling who he became. By the 1950s, men had to reach out to identify himself for who he was in history. Women began destroying the idea that men wore tunics, togas, colobiums, kilts, and other similar clothing that reflected the ever-increasing change in women's dresses and skirts. They wanted only the distinction of wearing one particular type of clothing while the man himself was seen as a stereotypical irrelevant figure who wore pants, shorts, and nothing else in history would be tolerated any longer. As women continued to change the course of stereotyping men, he began to see himself as less and less important. His appearance wavered in history, and now into the 21st century women now lie and cheat to obtain their goals of subverting the historical account of man's place in history.
In the motion picture, Immortals, a small boy was shown idolizing the warriors of Greek mythology. His mother, a prostitute priestess from a cult of women, was shown being submissive to his mother who had affairs with any man she could find. His idea of a father figure was whatever his mother felt he should have, not the responsibility of his mother to show good values towards their son's upbringing. As the story progressed, we only see the child reaching out to other men he sees who might can give him encouraging words towards his future control from a woman whose only desires were for herself and no one else. This same scenario was also played out in the popular series, Pirates of the Caribbean. Will Turner was only allowed to visit the coast once every 10 years from the Flying Dutchman, and Elizabeth Swann was there to take whatever she could from him. 9 months later, she pops out a child who also must only adhere to her every whim. Yet what kind of role models can his son hope to reach out to when the only other person he has is a single woman parent who uses every kind of ruse to get whatever she wants?
Always remember that in motion pictures today, the emphasis is about the woman or a girl. The man is now background noise to the plot, which is always about the girl or the woman. This idiocy reflects itself through the many vulgar television shows that permeate our view screens. This medium does not reflect or show the true reality of society any longer.
The real tragedy in today's society is that boys must accept abnormal or unnatural lifestyles. You don't see this in the girl mainstream world of domineering and submissive attitudes towards a boy as superior to him. We see this more and more, that the man is absolved from the mainstream media, through television, news, motion pictures, even social media outlets. This is why Colobium Pictures was created more than 100 years ago, because of the obvious needs to bring about a change in the understanding of the family unit. Without men, a woman who had no slave to back herself up on, she would have no way of performing the menial labor she needs to keep our home going, her life and subsistence, or even a normalcy to what was once a monogamous relationship. Men keep the world together because of how God intended it to be some 2,000 years ago when He created us in the Garden of Eden. Is it also why, if you look at motion pictures for the past 70 years, most subjects were on biblical premises? The time of the Romans was like no other in history, when men still were the prevailing gender in the world.
Tonight's program reflects an ever-changing perception that man himself is now inferior, unimportant, and progressively disappearing in our world. There may be more women than men, but without men there would be no human race. A woman cannot conceive a child without the man, not even by artificial means as insemination. Yet, when you hear about men today, the woman says that even those who donate their sperm to sperm banks are accountable to the child the woman has without his involvement. This is absolute retardation on the part of women, that they don't want a man in their relationships but still need him to procreate a child with. If you don't want a man in your life, live single and abstinent.
Six quavers and Paul. She sent us four quavers.
I'm going to sing a song about a square, and I want you to look all around your room for one. But remember, a square has four straight sides, and each side is just as long as the other, and it has four corners that are the same size. One, two, three, four. There's a square out there. Can you guess the square? Do you think that you can find it? You must be aware of the shape of a square if you really want to find it. Now let's look around for a square. Is the door shaped like a square? No, it's shaped like a rectangle. It has two long sides and two short sides. Now is the record shaped like a square? No, it's shaped like a circle. Now pick up the record cover. Run your fingers around the outside. Four straight sides, each one just as long as
بيحب الوصلة بيحب الوصلة لا لا
His name is Omran Daknesh, just 5 years old, and his feet barely hung over the edge of a seat in an ambulance. Dazed, he didn't cry as he wiped away blood and the dust of a building that collapsed around him in an airstrike. His silence somehow reminded the world today of its silence in the face of the atrocities in Aleppo. Omran was pulled out alive Wednesday. 5 other children died when the building they were in was hit during the relentless Syrian-Russian offensive on rebel-held areas in Aleppo. The image of Omran's face spread like wildfire on the internet. One tweet called him the real representative of the Syrian people.
Stop killing Syrian innocent people, civilian. Our children need to live in peace.
The doctor who treated Omran said today there were many more severe cases no one is paying attention to.
We need to protect our hospital, our doctors, our medical workers from airstrike.
Omran is recovering. His family now wants to escape. The same choice another boy's family made a year ago, Aylan Kurdi, whose body washed up on a beach. He too was a symbol of Syria's youngest victims. Now there's a new one. Tomorrow there may be another. Richard Engel, NBC News.
They've reported from around the world, challenged the powerful, and they bring all of this to every story that breaks.
We've got breaking news, and it's good news.
And touches your heart.
How do you even say thank you? Thank you is not big enough.
I made this.
The images shocked the world. Relentless bombings. Stunned survivors.
Hai, nama saya yang berubah. Hai, ambil cuti. Selesai. Atau apa lagi? Apa yang ada? Sudah.